free trade agreement, or the Comprehensive Economic and Trade Agreement, as the Prime Ministers are calling it, is going to bring real benefits to businesses on both sides of the relationship.
This clearly is a gold standard of an agreement.
As the world's fifth and sixth biggest economies, the UK and India are ideally positioned to benefit from this FTA. And that's
if we do it the right way, to achieve double of our current exports to the UK.
Into ANI, first and foremost, of course, about the Prime Minister Modi's visit to UK. How do you look at the visit overall, and would you like to talk about the vision, basically 2035? Your take regarding that?
Well, thank you very much for having me on today. First of all, to say we were absolutely delighted that Prime Minister Modi took the decision to come to the UK and make time in his very busy schedule. And he had a good day of discussions, both with the Prime Minister and some of our most senior ministers, and also with His Majesty the King. And it was for me, a real warm meeting. The evidence of engagement on both sides, the commitment to bring the UK and India to the next level of partnership and to work together, whether that's on trade, whether that's on environment, on defence and security. They really covered absolutely everything in their discussions, and both, I think, emerged sounding very positive indeed, with hope for what we can do together.
Christina, regarding this vision 2035, you want to share your thoughts regarding it, and how would you elaborate and how both countries can work together for that vision?
So that is a 10-year strategy that the Prime Minister set out. It's Vision 2035. It's publicly available, and I'd encourage people to take a look. And it talks about the work we will do together as two countries over the next decade. And it talks about what we will do together to promote growth and to improve the economies of both countries, how we will work together to deepen our cooperation on security and defence, how we will tackle global problems like climate change and the need to go for green energy. It talks about what we will do together on security and tech, with a real focus on high-tech, innovative technologies that potentially will disrupt and challenge how we do business. And finally, it talks about what we will do together on education, of course, young people being very, very important to both of our Prime Ministers.
Post the visit, which industry, UK industry, stands to benefit mostly from the FTA, and how is the British business preparing to engage more deeply with India, and what are the immediate follow-up steps post the visit by the Prime Minister?
Sure. So the free trade agreement, or the Comprehensive Economic and Trade Agreement, as the Prime Ministers are calling it, is going to bring real benefits to businesses on both sides of the relationship. There'll be a number of sectors in the British economy that will get additional support. So as a result of reduced tariff rates, for example, our whisky manufacturers are very excited by the opportunity to export more to India brings. But there will also be benefits for some of our services sectors like construction and like environmental services as well, which are really important. So right across the board, in both directions, there are exporters, there are services that will benefit from the opportunities that the FTA bring. In terms of how they're going to get themselves ready, well, there'll be a transition period now. In the UK, we will be making sure that businesses understand what the FTA means. The FTA itself is like 2,000 pages long, so it's going to take a while to get businesses to understand all the detail and to help them get ready for the opportunities that it presents.
Talking about the specifics, how do you see the FTA supporting broader strategic cooperation, be it in critical minerals or semiconductors and nuclear energy cooperation? What's your take regarding that?
So I think the thing about achieving a free trade agreement, which has been more than 3 years in negotiation, has been a long-standing commitment by both governments and by our previous government in the UK as well, is that it speaks to the deepening of ties across the overall relationship. And so I think the FTA sends a signal across the board and more widely to the rest of our governments and to our systems, to businesses, to our people, that these two countries mean business, that they are partners, and that we look to work together. And of course, the areas you mentioned there, technology and security, really, really important, very much part of Vision 2035.
Christina, this brings me to the last question. And what message does this FTA send to other global trading partners about the UK, India's approach to the strategic and the rule-based trade?
So as the world's fifth and sixth biggest economies, the UK and India are ideally positioned to benefit from this FTA. And that's a very strong message we send. We're both big, proud democracies, and our commitment to working together to the benefit of both nations, I hope, acts as a model for others around the world.
1,000 Indian companies already have a presence in the UK, and now that all the details of FTAs are out, with both countries opening up their market to each other, what is your overall view on the Indian-UK FTA? Do you see it as a game changer or cross-border trade and investment?
I think, like a lot of people have said, and so has the Prime Minister and the Minister, this clearly is a gold standard of an agreement because it establishes a very clear framework of how to access and mutual access to both the markets, but based on a lot of mutual trust and also safeguarding the local interest. I think that's very clear. For India, who needs to grow exports just besides services in goods and trade, I think this is a huge opportunity. Look at IT, you look at pharmaceuticals, you look at electronics, auto components. This is an opportunity where literally you have a clear path if we do it the right way to achieve double of our current exports to the UK. So the target is about 120 billion by 2030. So I think that is the key that one has to really focus on. And I think the other thing here, which is quite unique in this FTA, frankly, is it's not only a tariff cutting deal, by the way. It also opens up services, investments, mobility, and public procurement. So that's where, the thing has come up, like the whole public procurement infrastructure opens up in the UK for Indian IT, Indian construction, and Indian bidding for the medical side as well. So I think the double contribution convention that is now deferred and sort of removed benefits mobility of our professionals big time and actually saves nearly $500 million of what would otherwise be wasted contribution by the employer and the employee. So I think this is a very well thought out FTA, and it's not just about tariff cutting. It ups the ante to be able to now really penetrate each other's markets. And from India perspective, this is a golden opportunity where our private sector has to really now step up with the government having done most of the heavy lifting. That's where now I think the private sector needs to really focus on is how do you capitalize this and convert this into real exports. And yeah, that's right. Basically, that's what the challenge is now.
That both the government have done their job after 3 years of intense negotiation. The deal is finally sealed now. How is the Indian industry preparing itself to leverage the opportunities emerging from this historic agreement?
So look, I think firstly, the private sector will have to remember that cost is not the only differentiator, right? Yes, with tariffs coming down on 99% of our goods, yeah, you're at a kind of a level playing field with the folks who had it earlier, like Vietnam and Bangladesh and Turkey. So that's one part of it. But I think the big thing for the Indian private sector is to shift the focus to quality, innovation, global compliance. Now you're entering a very developed world. And like the minister always says, we're doing FTAs with the developed world, not with the developing world, which number one puts the onus on the private sector to invest in compliance, certification, and standards. So I think that's very, very critical. And that's going to take some heavy lifting, some investment, and maybe even a tough first year for the companies who want to capitalize in the long run. The second, the macro challenges first. The second one is that, our logistic cost and production factors are still expensive and a bit scarce. Although this government, as you know, through the digitization, through Gati Shakti, is investing a lot to make sure that logistic costs, power costs, and the targeted PLIs are on their way. It will take some more time. So maybe a little bit of targeted support to these companies, especially the MSMEs and SMEs who are going to be at the back end of the supply chain, may help a little bit. So we have to recognize that we are going to be slightly disadvantaged on the logistical side, and it'll take some time, but it is on the right direction, as we know, through the PM Gati Shakti program. So I think those are the two kind of macro things. Finally, it's going to boil down to companies investing in scale and innovation. And frankly, that is a little bit of a question mark, at least for me today, having seen for the last 4 or 5 years when the corporate tax rates were cut and there was an incentive to put money back in the business, we really didn't see that much of private capex pickup, right? So ultimately, India itself is a huge market, and one should have hopefully seen a lot more of investment in India. But now with these FTAs getting signed in such a kind of a volatile economic, geopolitical environment, this is the opportunity for the private sector to really get serious about investing and taking benefit of these so-called incentives and catalysts that has been already provided in the various last 2, 3 budgets. Third, I think we'll have to move away from this whole idea of export and forget. I think that's a very interesting one that I read the other day. We now need to, in an FTA like this, if you want to access public procurement, obviously medical services, you will have to really create on-the-ground presence in the UK as well. So it's not just exporting and forgetting about it, but it's also forming UK partnerships, setting up local offices, investing in joint ventures. If you want to especially open up, if you want to really access what the FTA opens up, which is $120 billion, $120 billion, yeah, 95 billion pound public procurement market in the UK. So there are massive opportunities. I think really it's up to us now to make sure that we can do all of this. And the final point is that, look, you're now dealing with a developed world, and therefore you have to be ready on tackling compliance complexity, okay? Alignment of standards, very, very critical. Regulatory divergence is there, so we'll have to really invest in making sure that we're regulatorily compliant. There will be documentation burden, especially for the smaller companies, but this is where government and common portals and some help from the chambers of commerce can help the MSMEs and SMEs. So look, all of this, I think, has been a fantastic outcome with what the government has done over 3 years of hard negotiation, safeguarding our interests, opening up a massive market. And I think now it's for the private sector to really invest in the areas I mentioned.
Sure, sir. So, sir, with the signing of this FTA, do you foresee Indian startup and MSMEs raising funds from UK institutional and private equity investors?
I think the flow, so I think that's a great point, because ultimately the FTA establishes a real signal to everybody that there is now mutual trust, mutual respect, and investments should flow. Foreign direct investment is what we need, should come more willingly, especially in areas where they see an opportunity, because now there is, another level of trust that has been established with FTA. So they should be able to come in here, whether it's private equity, venture capital, institutional capital, corporate capital, coming in to establish greenfield, but let's leave greenfield aside, even brownfield expansions of existing companies, tying up with Indian companies as JVs to both make in India for the Indian market, but also for exports. So I think the thesis now for investors who will be putting in capital into India will be to partner with the people here who can help them scale up, use the Indian cost structure, whether it's engineering, the skilled labor, and then sell it in India as well as export it back to the UK and the rest of the world. So I think that's point number one. Point number two is that there will be areas like, there's a whole, defense industrial roadmap that also has been announced by the prime ministers. And, that's going to require a deeper collaboration in defense manufacturing, technology, joint research facilities. So I think defense startups, defense entities can benefit a lot, if you really want to establish and you want to follow this defense industrial roadmap, which is a totally unique and I think a very creative way of getting more investment in aerospace and defense sectors to be made in India, for India, and for exports. And I would say the final one is going to be agri-tech and med-tech, where again, there's a lot of focus, diagnostics, surgicals, X-ray systems. Again, I think we as India will need both capital and the technology, which this FTA should really open up. So ultimately, how does this happen? I think it happens joint ventures. It happens through M&A. And of course, it happens through pure private equity investments into the country. And I think we have to, like in the TEPA, there was a $100 billion target for 10 years, while I'm not sure there's a target here. But just given the UK-India camaraderie and the trust that we have seen, and this one really establishes it, we would be amiss if we don't see a very significant FDI coming into India. I'm sort of less focused on what Indians invest in UK, but I'm more interested in seeing capital, both corporate and private capital coming into the country. And I think there's a huge opportunity, especially in these areas where industrial automation, medical automation, defense automation can really get a fillip. So I think in that context, MSMEs and startups will come up and you'll see, but whether the MSMEs or startups doesn't matter. What is more important is to see these three areas getting a fillip.
You are saying that there will be more cross-border M&A between India and UK firm after this FTA.
I think so. Absolutely. And whether it's M&A as in M&A the way you're referring to, which is taking control of companies, I would say, I don't know whether it's control of companies, but it will definitely be Indian entities, both young and more established ones, being open to receive capital and technology. And if that means there are joint ventures, I think that is definitely a base case that we should think about and encourage.
Two of the world's biggest economies, India and UK, have signed a landmark trade pact. What does this agreement signal to the rest of the world, especially in the context of shifting global trade dynamics and supply chain realignments?
I mean, look, I think India is following its own strategy, which is let's look after our interests. Let's create the trade corridors. Let's also establish investment corridors. And already, as you know, so many FTAs have been done, right? The Australia, the UAE, the EFTA, and now the UK. I think EU will be probably next. Again, I don't know for sure. I'm not involved. I would say EU is a huge market, 27, 28 blocks. And that will be another game changer. And actually now with this FTA, you have a kind of a benchmark and a template ready to deploy. So I would say the message to EU and those not yet done, like the US, is that, look, India is moving on. It's offering an open market. It's inviting capital. It has incredible advantages that are only getting stronger by the day, which is firstly the local market, the labor, the skilled labor, the cost advantage, improving logistics, a very formalized economy. Digitization investment by this government has been huge over the last 10 years in every aspect. So all of that finally comes to fruition. And a willingness to listen to people and willingness to pivot where required and very flexible. So I think it's becoming quite evident that we have to talk on equal terms, which I think we have done a fantastic job in the way these FTAs have been negotiated from a position of strength, but also reasonableness. So I think the message is pretty clear. I think everybody will be signing up whenever that happens. I would say EU will be the next, or should be the next, because that really then kind of puts pressure is the wrong word, but sort of leaves some of them out who would also like to then sign up. So I'm not involved in the strategy, but whatever I'm reading in the newspapers is that this seems to be the right way to go about it. And this government is going about it very diligently, very focused, working 24/8, literally, and trying to get these things wrapped up, but not without. I mean, I've seen a little bit of it from close quarters, and the level of detail, the level of diligence and detail is incredible.
So, sir, on Saturday, a top official of the ministry was saying that if the US and EU tariff were EU country were not involved in this tariff war, then I guess the FTA with EU have been done, and you are saying that EU will be next. What is your understanding for the US bilateral, sir, as you are also the member of
Uh-huh.
USI SPF? Or
No, I
what?
have no idea. I don't think these bodies are involved. I don't think we're involved. I literally don't have any information, to be honest.